really got me in ham radio, and we didn't really get into this, was in seventh grade. It was really pivotal. My uncle gave me an old Helicrafters S38
Ah,
shortwave radio, and I threw a wire up. I just climbed the tree and threw a wire up and drilled a hole through the house, and put the wire through.
wow. Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Hamdom Thoughts, a podcast about ham radio, electronics, software, and tinkering. I'm your host, Dennis, FCC licensed amateur extra radio operator, call sign AI6XG Dan. Today we talk with a ham friend of mine, AI6XG Dan, who lives in the northern part of the greater Sacramento area, just like me. Dan is a hacker and a tinkerer who creates his own microcontroller-based gear. He also plays with radio on the mountains with summits on the air and Morse code. I met Dan at the CW Ops CW Academy class, Level 2, and also at a local hamvention, which we call Pacificon. Later, he actually helped me on a SOTA peak, my second ever. Let's talk to Dan now. Stay tuned. Hey Dan, great to see you again. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing great. It's really good to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's we chat on JerryNet on the Slack quite often, but it's a rare chance that I get to see you face to face, and we're here on a Zoom call right now. So appropriate social distancing. How's it going up there in northern Sac? I'm in the southern part of greater Sacramento area. So what are we like? Maybe 15, 20 miles apart?
I think so. Something like that. By the way the crow flies or the radio waves propagate.
And it's funny too, because you always seem to, I guess you have a better antenna setup. You pick up all these SOTA activators and I'm like, I can't hear a thing over here. So I don't know what's going on with your antenna, your nice station.
And we've got the same rig too.
Yes, that's true. I really need to up my antenna game, like big time. Thinking of throwing a longer wire on my end fed and just putting it higher up so that I'm able to pick up people better.
Yeah, I think higher up is the key there. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we can gab about everything there, but I really like these podcasts that you're doing because I get to really learn a lot about the hams that I just see on JerryNet or that we chase or activate each other. So it's fun to really learn more about each other.
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk to you in particular today because I wanted to get your perspective on just being an active maker and hacker. You've got quite a few personal projects, one of them being this really cool Arduino, is it Arduino? It's more of a Raspberry Pi based UTC local time clock, very similar to something I saw from MFJ, which I actually have hanging in the garage. But this one is powered, it's updated through the internet, and it shows me both UTC and local time. And you built this thing from scratch. But before we get into all that, let me give you the opportunity to talk about yourself, your interests, the maker space, just your background. So why don't you tell us a little more about you?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm not from California. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I was there through my undergraduate. So I went to school in Wisconsin. And, really, I've been interested in making stuff, I think, from fifth or sixth grade, something like that. And, early on, it was really more about tearing stuff apart and learning about it. And then I started just building things, and it was fun. Yeah, it's an interesting story. When I moved from Wisconsin to my first job, I had like 20 old TV chassis in my basement that I had to get rid of because that's what I used for all my parts and just to learn. So it was good. So yeah, so went to school in Wisconsin. My education really wasn't engineering. I was applied math and physics as a major, and it was a combination degree like that. And I took some engineering, but the engineering was in semiconductor physics and semiconductor processing. So as an undergraduate, I was making integrated circuits. So that's the industry I went into, was semiconductors. So
Wow.
we were making the chips that makers use to make things.
Oh,
So I think
that's cool.
yeah, it was something that I wanted to do since seventh grade. It was I it was a really fun time to do. So what I really did was I worked in the quality and reliability aspect. Um, Adam is a quality engineer, so we have some common things.
Hmm.
Adam K68RK. And especially at the beginning of my career, I worked in failure analysis. So when devices did not work in our lab, we would strip them down and figure out why they didn't work. And that would, a lot of times, you'd have to go down to the sub-transistor level and figure out what was wrong. So that was a lot of fun. And part of what I did was I had a lab that I put together that we had scanning electron microscopes so we could look at the parts in really high resolution and magnification.
So really
And
getting down in there and really blowing up the image of these circuits, huh?
yeah, yeah. So either we would strip layers away and look at the metal contacts or the individual transistors, or we'd even cross section. So if we had a particular area that we had concern about, we would just cross section into that area and we could look at the various aspects of the structure.
Yeah.
And I also did some work on real high sensitivity analysis of what kind of elements were in the chip. So part per million, part per billion type of analysis.
Oh, wow.
So that was fun, but it was what I learned in school and what I really liked. But ham radio really taught me the engineering, the electronics portion. So I could in school learn about the physics and how the devices actually work at a subatomic level. But I didn't have to learn the electronics because I already knew it from ham radio, but I did in ham radio.
Nice.
And it, ham radio is great. And I think kids should get into it just because they don't have to go to engineering school. They can just learn it on their own.
Yeah. It's practical and it's applied almost immediately.
Yeah. Talking about applications, in the labs, the technicians liked me as an engineer because I actually knew how to solder and put things together like they do. And a lot of engineers, when they get, especially out of school, they've never really built anything. So they didn't know how to solder or put anything together. And so the technicians liked me. But yeah, another cool thing we did real quick was with the scanning electron microscope. We were in the first labs to do that. We were able to use the electron beam to measure the voltages on a device. So we would put a device in the SEM, we'd fire it up, and it was a sample and hold type of thing, and we'd be able to figure out what the waveform was using an electron beam.
Wow.
So that's kind of down there.
So we were CW Ops classmates. It was CW Academy Level 2. And that's where I first saw you in a Zoom call. We hung out with Bob, K6RB, our instructor. And yeah, I remember struggling through that class because that was the class where we introduced 25 words per minute and just the Morse runner and what is that other one? Rough ZXP.
Yeah.
And the assignments and having to translate things. And that was a fun time. But then shortly after that, after the class ended, I think I posted that I was going to Pacificon, and you reached out and said, "Well, I'm going too." This was in San Ramon in 2018, and it was nice to hang out with someone. I thought it was cool that I would go to a conference for once and actually know someone there, rather than just awkwardly looking at different trade show vendors and keeping to myself and maybe talking to people. I mean, that's kind of my typical conference experience where I'm largely introverted when I'm in those huge settings. So it was cool to meet up with you. And we talked quite a bit about SOTA. You showed me your KX2 kit. I ended up buying one of the Ed Fong J-poles. But all that rambling just to say, yeah, I've known you for a little bit, and it's been going on 2+ years now. And we also went on a trek together up Rag Ridge. But before we get to that little interesting thing, I wanted to ask you how you started off in Summits on the Air, and also how that ties into your CW operation and your attendance in the class.
Yeah, well, maybe we can start even back. I've been a ham. I first got my license in 1973 or 72, something
Oh,
like that.
wow.
Yeah, so I'm a really old guy.
So I wasn't even born when you became a ham.
Yeah, I know. Just
I don't want to emphasize the OM aspect, but just pointing that out. Sorry, Dan.
So, that's okay. I'm the old man of JerryNet. I know that. So it's all right. I don't think anybody else. Most of the guys would probably. So, but back then, when I got my novice, it was 5 words per minute, and my first transmitter was a little single tube transmitter, and then I built a 2-tube transmitter.
And, okay.
Yeah, but I was also doing work with transistors and all that, but it was kind of fun to do that. But then after I was novice through college. And then when I first got my job, my boss was a ham also. And he convinced me, he actually tricked me into going down to the field office, FCC field office in Dallas, and taking the 13 words per minute code test. And that's when I got my advanced class. And, I was on CW for quite a few years. And then as soon as I got my advanced, I put the key away and just did single sideband.
I remember when 13 words per minute was such a daunting idea.
Yeah.
I mean, even the 5 was scary to me. But this was all, I was getting into it after all of this had passed. But I also like to know what my predecessors went through. And so I was reading about the 13 words per minute requirement. And I was like, can I do that? And it just seemed so impossible for me, because I was struggling just even catching one letter at 5 words per minute.
Yeah, and 13 words per minute when you got the little FCC guy watching you as you're taking the exam.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It sounded like it was 23 words per minute.
Some test pressure there. You got someone over your shoulder.
But fortunately, at that time it was multiple choice, so you would just answer questions like, I remember as a 5-element Yagi was part of the thing that was sent to me, but I only got like the 5 and the EL and maybe the AGI, but it's close enough that I could answer the question that it was a 5-element Yagi, so it was good. But, and then later I was doing single sideband, and then in the mid to late 80s, I just kind of set everything aside. Yeah, I let my ticket lapse. And so it wasn't until I was at the Maker Faire in 2017, I said, there was some volunteer examiners there, and I thought, well, I'll just sit down and take the test and see. And I passed general, and then I passed extra. And the nice thing was there was no code, but I still remembered CW. But the thing was, I thought, okay, now I got to start thing about CW. And I was still where I would write down each letter. And that's how I learned.
Yeah.
And that was the great thing about CW Ops is it really forced you to do head copy. And for everybody out there that's starting in Morse code, don't write down the letters. Just do a head copy, no matter how hard it is. Even if you got to take notes afterwards, head copy from the very, very start. And it's a really hard habit to break when you're used to writing characters down.
And so for even those who don't know what that means, head copying is basically translating in your head, like as you hear the tones, the dits and das, you are kind of in real time. Well, not kind of, you are in real time associating that to letters. And then what Rob told us, our instructor in CW Ops, was that eventually patterns of these characters start becoming words in our mind as we hear combinations. And I'm still getting there, a few here and there, but not quite there yet. And that's probably because of lack of practice. I should be there by now.
Yeah, I think it's like a foreign language. You just have to use it. And I can, like I can pick that up pretty easily. And some other things that we use during SOTA activations and chases, but other combinations can be hard. But anyway, so back, I got my ticket and I didn't really know what to do. And I'd been out of the Hamden for 20 years, 30 years, and things had changed. So the first 2 or 3 QST magazines I just devoured. I just read everything I could, and including the ads and just trying to get up to date. And I don't know how I found out about SOTA. I have no idea. It might have been some of Jerry's videos. I might have read an article about it, but as soon as I learned about it, I said, that's what I got to do, because I had already been hiking in the mountains a lot, and I really liked hiking. And I'm not as much of a hiking beast as Adam or Rex are.
Yeah.
But it's something that I really enjoyed. And I thought, that's gotta be the thing to do. So I bought a KX2 and I bought a QRP random wire antenna. Good companions, because you need a tuner with a random wire. And the KX2 had the tuner, at least I bought it with it. And it was sometime I had to go down to Joshua Tree National Park for a photography course. And it's like, I'll just bring the stuff with me. But there's a couple peaks in the national park, and I'll just go there. So my very first peak was Ryan Mountain in Joshua Tree National Park. And I got out there, and I had already known that I had to spot myself. But I was like, oh man, I've been or practicing Morse code, but I was still writing everything down. So I'm up on the mountain making contacts, and you know how it is. It's amazing. You spot yourself, and all these people are just on top of you.
Yeah.
And I've never been part of a pileup like that. So I worked myself through that. But that's what really convinced me that I have to get my CW back, especially since it was 30 years from when I really was using a lot of CW. So that's how I got the idea of going to CW Ops, and it's great. I recommend CW Ops for anybody that wants to get their Morse code better.
Are you planning to join CW Ops Academy Level 3?
If my CW Ops buddy Dennis comes with me.
Oh,
sure.
yeah. I'll take that.
Let's do it.
Let's both sign up. I just, I need to really get back on the ball. But yeah, that's the one that we're in CWT quite a bit. And we will have to prove ourselves. What does it go to? 25 or 30 words per minute where we're...
Yeah, I think 30.
30 words per minute where we'll be practicing in that speed. So that will be a workout. I remember those classes for level 2. I'd come out of them and I was tired. I was like actually physically exhausted from that, and I'd come out and I'd be like, wow, that was a brain workout right there.
Oh, yeah, Morse Runner or the Rough Sea or whatever it's called. I can only do like 30 minutes of it, then I'm just like shot.
Yeah.
And sometimes up on the mountain, I'll be operating for an hour, but man, the last 15 or 20 minutes, sometimes I just can't copy the calls real well, or my sending is bad. Yeah, I had one last activation a couple of weeks ago. Somebody just sent back a question mark, so I had to send it all to him. It's like, okay, I think this is time that I got QRT and get off the mountain. I was just getting really.
You just sent a long message, and then all you get is did it did it.
Exactly. What the heck were you saying?
What did you just say? Oh, that's great. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our joint activation on Rag Ridge. Now this is designator W6/NC343, and we had been talking for a while now about going on a joint activation, and finally we pinned a date, and that was, I think, in February.
It was.
And then
day after Valentine's Day, I had to make sure it was okay with Jackson.
Okay. Yeah, and so we met up right before the actual area. I can't remember the exact town. And then you drove over to the location where we would actually start. And I was coming into this thinking, okay, we'll find a trailhead and then we'll just work our way up this peak, and hopefully it's not too steep. And then when we start, it literally was, let's walk through this break in the barbed wire, and immediately it was super steep with no trail. It was just literally the side of a mountain. Yeah. And then, after a bit of struggle, and I videoed the struggle, we reached a trail, or more like a service road that was unused, and then had a nice leisurely pace to the top. But you and I learned recently, I think you sent me a message and said, hey, guess what? Rag Ridge is now inaccessible. The property owner has said that he doesn't want people from our organization, our quote unquote organization, to go on the land and operate. And so I wanted to ask you how you felt about this banned peak. Now we're two rogues. We've activated a private property peak.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say that if I had known that it was private property and there was no trespassing sign, we wouldn't have gone up, because for that day I was actually thinking of another peak that was just I think 100 yards down the road. And when I went into Google Street View, I saw that there was a nice, fresh, no trespassing sign on the route. So I was like, okay, we can't do that. And we did go through breaking the fence, but there was a trail kind of through that break. And, when I'm out hiking, like in some of these state recreation areas, quite often you're going through old farmland, and the state never took down the fence. You just got to break in the fence and you go through. So I didn't really think that was private property. It's not like we had to climb over the fence or through the fence.
Yeah.
So we just have to make sure that in the future, I'll just do a little bit more investigation and make sure it's not private property, and we have to respect the property owner if they don't want us on the property.
Yeah, but absolutely.
If I knew it was private property, then we would have done a different peak.
I think the concern from the message on the group's board that you shared was, just liability and making sure that no one gets hurt while they're on the property. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense to me. Although in my case, if I set out to do something like that and hurt myself, I would not think about the landowner at all. I would just be like, I messed up. I did this to myself, you know? So it's unfortunate that not everyone thinks that way, and that, you know, the landowners have to sort of protect themselves, even though they have this land that is largely unused.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. If I did something stupid and hurt myself, it's up to me.
Yeah.
To take care of it on there.
So I got a lot of good practice on that trip. I got to test out Gaia, the app that tracks your trail. And even something that simple, I know that we had roads and all that, but there was certain points in time where I was like, which way am I going? It's very easy to get turned around. So I would just look back at my Gaia app and I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be going, I'm pointed the wrong way. I should be going this way. And also tested out my InReach, which I've talked about quite a bit. That was good for getting the tweets out. It's a good way to spot. Just indirectly, you can actually text someone, hey, can you spot me? We're activating soon. But that was a fun trip. It's unfortunate we can't do it again.
Yeah, it was a pleasant day up there and really had fun. And we had I downloaded the KLM file also. So we had the track. So it was a little bit of bushwhacking at the beginning and a little uphill, but it was worth it. It was a great day out there.
Yeah, perfect weather. Speaking of your file, W6RIP shared just a few weeks ago an app that he uses now that kind of redraws the path on a video. I forget the name of it. If I find it, I'll link it. But it's kind of cool. You can actually trace. It looks like Google Earth, and then you see your little arrow kind of traversing the trail. But it can import files like that. So I might do that for our activation.
Cool. Yeah, almost every activation I do now, I'll either, if somebody else has a file online that I can download, I download that into my Gaia app, and or if not, then I just try to figure out a route that's close and put that in. And if it works out, then I usually post on my blog. You know, like Sand Ridge is a peak that I've done the last couple of years, and there was a trail, I think from KU6J, and it was one way to get there. And it was I remember it was my first real bushwhacking experience, and Rex and Adam were kind of giving me a hard time about, you know, get out there and do it. And I found my way, but I found an easier way. So there's actually two ways to get to Sand Ridge Peak. And I kind of feel like it's not my peak, but I'm the only one that's activated in the last couple of years. And the first or last activation before that was 2017. So it's kind of fun to go up there, and there's probably like hardly anybody else that ever goes up on top of that peak.
And yeah, that's cool. You should actually do the JerryNet thing and just call it Dan Peak after after having activated it and no one else has, and just claim it. Put a little TM by it too.
Others have activated it, so it was quite a few years ago. So it's just recent activity. I can't claim it as a first act for sure, but I'm the only one that's done it in recent history. In there. So
very cool.
But it's fun. But you just learn. I like to, you know, a few things on the Gaia app. I actually pay for the premium so I can download the maps on my phone. So even if I'm out of cell coverage, I can still get the maps. And I think that's a real key. I remember when I first started hiking, I went on a trail. It was off the Pacific Crest Trail. And all I had was my running shoes, no trekking poles. And it was, man, it was just really, really steep. And going downhill, there's a couple times I just had my life pass before me.
Oh boy.
It was just really, really treacherous.
Wow.
And I didn't know where I was because all I had was Google Maps and it wasn't on there.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I found my way back and I bought some decent boots. I bought trekking poles, and we know,
Yeah.
Dennis, that trekking poles are really good things to bring.
Yes, I know this in a very, very personal way because our activation at that start where we were climbing up to get to the service roads, I'm like, no, no, I'm fine. I'm good. And you're like, you sure? Here, have one of my trekking poles. I'm like, I'm right. And then at a certain point, maybe 2 minutes in, I said,
Give me that trekking. Give me both of them.
yeah, I think I'll take that now. I am really falling over here and sliding a lot. And it was the kind of steepness that had all the fallen leaves on it too. So it was not only steep, but it was slippery because of the leaves.
Yep.
And that was quite an experience. So now my trekking poles are always in my trunk now.
Good.
And even if I don't think I need them, I will have them.
Yeah. So the story, I went back this summer to that same trail with a little more experience and the right. Actually, I have some really cool trail running shoes now that are really, really good. I really like, and my trekking poles. And the trail was tough, but I didn't see my life go before my eyes. I felt safe, and I had my Gia app with the maps downloaded, so I knew exactly where I was. And I actually found a new way to out of there into Basin Peak, and it was a great experience. It was fantastic. So be prepared.
Yeah.
If you're going to go out on the trails, have the right, just don't wear sneakers, get some decent boots, some trekking poles, and just make sure you know where you're going to go.
Yep.
And then everything's good. And that was a fantastic. It was 180 degrees from my experience a few years before that. So
Very cool.
It was great. Yeah.
So let me jump over to your remote station. I wanted to talk about that a little bit because, like you said, we have very similar rigs, but you have a very interesting remote station. Can you tell us how you conceived of that idea? It's literally, you don't see your rig at all unless you have to go to it. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, in fact, you can see some photos on my QRZ page. So it all came down. I said to my wife, I'd like to put an antenna up, decent one. And she said, not in our yard. And my mother-in-law actually lives next door. And we have some acreage and she has some acreage. So it's the usual thing, just put it over in her place. So
just put it over in her place. I like it.
Yeah, and that's okay because I actually have Wi-Fi over there. I've Ethernet dropped over there and Wi-Fi, and so out of necessity, the Flex and I have a big IR from Stepper Vertical, and so I have the control box and a couple enclosures outside next to the shed. So obviously I couldn't be out there fiddling with the knobs and things like that. So the Flex is the 6400 is great. You can do whatever you need to through a LAN connection. That was fine, but I really didn't want to have the rig running all the time because basically when you've got to have it powered up so you can access it, whether it's through the Maestro or through Smart SDR. So I said, well, I'll just build something that will power the rig up and down. And fortunately, the 6400 has a connection on the back that all you got to do is give it is either a low or high to turn it on or off. And I Ethernet out there, so I said, well, let's figure out how we do this. So I went through and looked at a bunch of apps, and I decided to use a Telegram app, which is basically a messaging app that you can send messages and commands from your cell phone or from your PC or tablet. And they had an API, and people have written modules for Arduino and Raspberry Pi so that you can put the Telegram bot right on your Raspberry Pi and it will respond to the messages that you send to it. So I just did a Raspberry Pi Zero out in the enclosures and made it and put a bot in there so that I can message with my phone to turn the rig on and off, and also monitor whether the rig is on, because even though you think you turn it on, you don't know if you really turn it on or not. And I also have temperature and humidity sensors out there because, as you know, Dennis, it gets really, really hot here.
Yeah.
So like this weekend is going to be really, really hot, and I'll for sure shut the radio down at times because it's just too hot out there for it to be operating, even in the enclosure. And what was really surprising to me was in the winter, because I do have some vent holes on the enclosure, the humidity actually goes almost to 100% in the enclosure when we have all the fog and rain and stuff. So I actually have to have the rig on most of the winter just to keep the enclosure, the humidity drier. So
you're using the rig to actually reduce the humidity through its heat generation?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Yep.
I've always called ham gear modified heaters, because it's just like PCs. If you want the performance of an amp or a rig, you're going to generate quite a bit of heat as well.
So Dennis, have you ever had use a tube rig?
No, I have. Well, I've had the tube amps for audio equipment.
Yeah.
So I know that they do get pretty hot, but I've never worked with a radio that uses vacuum tubes.
Yeah, that gets really hot. So, I mean, my first transmitters and transceivers were all tubes, and that's one thing I like to do is I rebuild and rework old vintage radios when I have time from my other projects.
Yep.
It's fun to do. So anyway, back to the remote station. So yeah, it works out well. I can tell what the temperature and humidity is from, as long as I have an internet connection. I can be on the other side of the world and see if my rig is up and turn on and off. And there's a lot of IOs on the Raspberry Pi Zero. So in the future, I may be using it to switch antennas.
Yes.
One thing I want to do is I want to put an end-fed half wave up at 80 through 10, but there's a way of switching it so that it turns into, you can load it as a 160 meter quarter wave.
Oh, okay.
As long as you've got enough radials and stuff like that, and I've got the room that I can do that. And I just have some trees pruned and serviced, so I had pay the tree guys to shimmy up a tree about 50 feet. So I have a pulley and Dacron rope up there. So now I can hang my half wave up high, and that's what you want.
Yeah.
You want copper as high as you can. And I see that difference like on my vertical with the step IR, they've got the copper beryllium strap or whatever it's called. It goes up and down. And so like on 15 meters and above, you can put in a 3/4 wave mode. So you've got it almost fully extended up 33 feet. And it's really incredible how much better you can receive when you've got a 30 plus foot of copper in the air versus 10 feet.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty cool. And sometimes I'll have the antenna in the 40 meter configuration, so it's fully extended, and I'll be listening to somebody on 20 meters and I can hear them. But if I want to chase them, then I got to retune the antenna down to 20 meters and it's shorter. And a lot of times I just can't hear them anymore because it's not enough copper out there.
It's not high enough.
Yeah, so I'm really excited.
Have you ever noticed if verticals in particular, because you say you have the big IR by Step IR or Stepper. I don't know how to pronounce their name, but
it always Stepper to me. Yeah.
Stepper. Do you notice more noise on a vertical versus a horizontal? That's something that I kind of noticed, but I wasn't sure if it was just my setup.
Yeah, but we're remote. We're remote enough that the noise isn't bad, but it definitely compared to the horizontal, and I'm looking forward to that with the half wave. I'll have a substantial horizontal. There'll still be some vertical, but So it'll be horizontal. But it depends, if the sun's out and my neighbors' inverters are throwing out some trash, then I have a little higher noise level. And
Hmm.
that's just living in urban area. That's the nice thing about SOTA. You're up on a 9,000-foot peak, and
Yes.
as long as you don't have a bunch of cell towers, it's a really, really quiet.
Yep.
It's nice.
I was talking with another guest, um, and he was commenting on the noise floor up on the peaks. So, have you ever had it where you thought your radio was broken because it was just too quiet?
On the KX2, no, because I can usually put the preamp on and hear enough noise and stuff. But
Yeah.
the mountain topper, sometimes I'm going, God, is anybody around? So I always tune up to the FT8 bands, where the frequencies where everybody's throwing all the digital trash. And I can usually hear something there. I go,
Yeah.
okay,
It works.
it's working.
that's, that's a good verification method. Just throw it on FT8 and see if you get some of the sounds.
Exactly. But you'll spot yourself, and then you throw out a couple CQs, and there's always a time lag between when people see your spot and they start responding.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, oh man, did I hike 3.5 hours and nobody's going to contact me?
Well, my problem is I'm normally on, I'm doing something, and I'll pick up the ham alert whenever I notice my phone and look at it, because I don't have it actively making noise most of the day. And then I'll be like, oh man, Dan was on, and this ham alert just came like an hour and a half ago. So he is not still there. That's happened more times than not. And I always kick myself. Now I put my phone like kind of right in front of me, so it will light up if something's going on with ham alert.
But you never know. The peaks that I've got cell coverage on, I'm looking at Slack also, so you can always try to message me. And like the one I did earlier this week, Tinker Knob, I was actually up there for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, I got to get back and hike back so that I'm hiking in daylight.
Yeah.
But if I know somebody is looking, so you never know. Even if it's an hour later, I might still be up on the peak, and you can send me a message and just see.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to set up. But usually, I'm taking photographs when I set up, and when I take down, I'll just kind of. It's just so beautiful up there and cool. And like on Tinker, I could see Granite Chief, which I had activated the week before, and then you turn the other way, you can see Castle Peak, which I'm going to go and activate in another week or two. And then you look between those two, and you can see North Star and the 3 peaks long North Star that I had activated. It's just fun. It's just so beautiful and nice out there, and it's really, really special.
In the line of like Adam, Rex, Charlie, and other SOTA activators, are you one to do multiple peaks on a single trip? Have you done more than one before?
Yeah, I've done more than one. I'm not the SOTA beast that they are, and I'm not even close to being Mountain Goat. Mountain Goat is just to get 1,000 points activating is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, right around us, it's mostly 1-pointers, right? So
yeah,
that would be 1,000 1-pointers.
Exactly. And the peaks I do up in the Sierra are 8-pointers, so that's 125 peaks.
Yeah, still significant.
Yeah, so it really depends. So there's some peaks that you can do, like Tinker Knob takes me 3.5 hours just to hike to it, and 3.5 hours back. So that's a day for me. And I just do day hikes. I don't camp, and I probably should if I'm really a SOTA person, but I just don't. But there are some peaks like Mount Lincoln, and then there's right next to it on Donner Ski Ranch is it just has a number, but I think they call it Signal Hill also, and you can do that, and you can do those 2 peaks in a day. Mm-hmm. And then the ones by North Star, is Mount Watson Road, and there's 3 peaks that you could do in a full day. I only did 2 because I was meeting my wife for our anniversary that weekend, so it was more important that I met her on time and
Yes.
spent the weekend together. And then,
Priorities.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then I did the 3rd peak after the weekend. So that one you could definitely do probably 3 peaks in one day if you get
Yeah.
up there early. So yeah, so there are some, but I think
Well,
yeah,
when we did Rag Ridge, afterwards we made it back to the car, and at certain points I had to slide down in some parts. But you weren't watching, so I was like, okay, at least I can save face here. But then we hopped in your car, and you're like, I want to check out another entry point. And so I was thinking in the back of my mind that I was like, are we going to do 2 peaks today? Now, it was a little bit later in the day, but I was thinking, if Dan wants to do another peak, I'm game. I just know I'm
oh,
going to be beat. I'm going to be horribly tired after all this is over. But actually, we just checked out the entrance. I think you were planning your next trip.
yeah, yeah.
And I had a both relief and disappointment, if there's a such thing, because yeah, I had the bug. I was so stoked to have done that activation that I was thinking I would love to continue doing this.
So I think if we had, it was February, so you only have so much daylight. And I think if we had started a little earlier and maybe taking a little less time on Rag Ridge, we could have done both peaks. But
Yeah.
you know, for me, I like to make sure that I work all the chasers. And when we were up there, we were busy with all the chasers pretty much all the time. So um,
Yep.
I'm not usually I don't just get my 4 chases and then get out to peak. I really want to work as many chasers as possible, and I really appreciate the chasers, and I like to chase at times, and so without chasers we can't activate, and without activators you can't chase.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to contact me, I'll be there. And you know, if you're hiking in 3 or 4 hours, you want to make a few contacts and
Yeah.
stuff there.
Exactly. You're the one who told me that Scott was on another peak, and we both did summit to summit contacts, which I never thought I would do, but that was cool. Got him on
Yeah.
CW, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's weird when you're up there. Inevitably, there's someone else on another peak somewhere that kind of coincides. And I think that was in the afternoon. We were there like maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which
Yeah.
in my experience is a little late for activators. They like to go in the mornings or early before the sun gets really hot. But again, it was February, so yeah, I guess that's normal. But
Yes,
it was
you know,
cool to catch Scott that one time.
and it was great that we did that peak when we did because COVID came and pretty much shut things down. So
Yeah, that's a good
it,
transition too. I wanted to ask you, how has COVID and the shutdown affected your operation in ham radio?
yeah, there's a couple of things. I think there's good and bad. Um, the good thing is I actually start chasing more. So
Yep.
I, especially at the very beginning, I was really leery about going out and hiking a lot because everybody was home from work and they were all on the trails, and I didn't want to be on the trails with them. So I just stayed home and I would chase. So it really got me into chasing. So that was a good thing. Probably the bad thing, the makerspace that I belong to, they basically got shut down, and so you know I miss some of the people I used to hang out with, and I can't use. There's a period there, still a period that I can't use a lot of the equipment, and the location that was closest to me is shut down permanently because with COVID and
Mm.
everything, they just had to consolidate. So that was a bad thing.
Yeah. Unfortunate. Yeah.
Unfortunate. And when I made your enclosure for the clock, there was like a 2 week period where we were allowed to use the equipment if we were fully masked and took all the right precautions, and it got shut down right after that. So you're lucky you got your
So
clock.
I have a collector's clock,
You have
probably one of a kind.
one of a kind, that's for sure.
It's cool. The acrylic enclosure has your call sign etched into it, has mine, and see through. So you see all the internals, how it's working, and some cool toggle switches for different modes. It's a really cool thing. I will link your blog description and kind of process for making this clock in the show notes so people can see what it looks like. But I really appreciate that. That was more of the story behind that. It was kind of a barter, right, between us.
Yeah, I got a really cool 3D printed paddle, which I use almost exclusively from you.
Yeah, I actually didn't even put it together for you. That's how bad I am. I just said, I don't know when I can put this together. So are you okay with the parts? And you're like, yeah, I'll put it together. Sure. So I definitely think I made I got out better in this barter trade deal.
You know, a barter never ends. So.
Yeah. But I love the clock. It's great. And I have it and it's on. And every once in a while they'll say, okay, this contest is this time UTC. And I just turn my head, look at the clock you made, and I know when that will be or how far away that is. So it's really cool.
And that clock project really came out of the makerspace. They had a bunch of parts that were given to them, and the kind of head tech guy said, well, these look really cool. How do you use them? And that was the big LCDs. And I said, oh, I'll figure it out. So I did and had some fun with it.
Yeah, really cool. So any advice you have for people? Anything you want to mention?
Oh, well, make sure you check for private property before you do a SOTA activation. One thing.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yeah.
We kind of joked a little bit about it, but it's really good to respect other people's property, and we don't want to give SOTA a bad name. And just like when you're on top of a peak, just don't leave anything behind. Just leave it as it was.
Definitely. Yeah.
But, I think one of the things that I really that I work on and do some things with some nonprofits and things is get kids interested in STEM. And ham radio is one way to do it. Or if it's just coding or playing with an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi or whatever. Or maybe they're really into music or something like that. But just help people, especially kids, just get interested in different hobbies and different pursuits. And you never know what will come up. But just, this crazy fifth grader back in Wisconsin many, many decades ago, more decades than I want to admit, took his sister's record player and took it apart and got in trouble. That was part of how
There's something to that, because I got in trouble a lot for basically destroying things as well. I do remember getting yelled at for many things. I've taken clocks apart, radios, various valuable items just to see how they work. And some of the time I was able to put them back together without anyone noticing, but most of the time not. And yeah, it's definitely important to encourage that curiosity.
Yeah, and we just need to get more kids interested in things. And, for me, I'm a little biased towards STEM, but if somebody's really interested in music or art or photography, just help them out. And I think that's something that we can do as, being part of the older generation, is just help guide some of the kids to something that they really aspire to. And maybe prod them to do something they're not comfortable with doing.
Yeah, Totally great advice. Well, Dan, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Dennis, we need to find somebody to interview you because
yes.
I think you have a lot of interesting things in your background.
Yeah, I have thoughts on that. Maybe like a cross interview with someone active on maybe the YouTube platforms, and he can live stream while I ask my questions or something like that. I don't know, but I've thought about it.
That won't be me. I haven't produced any videos. I like watching the videos. I like, especially some of the SOTA contacts and things. But
you're definitely one of the other mad scientists that I think of when putting something together or have a design in mind, and you always chime in on recommendations when people are making
more than people want.
No, everyone is throwing around these designs for like half squares and different antennas and even programming things, and you always have some good insights.
I think that's one other thing that I like to just throw out there, and then we'll let you cut me off, is if you do an experiment or find something really interesting, publish it. So like earlier this spring I did some work on the end-fed half-wave matching transformer and the role of the primary capacitor. And this, the YouTube videos are great, but a lot of times it's just good to have the data and the conclusions. And I just recently got a comment on one of my blogs from Danny of My Antennas, E73M. I mean, that's a great call. Wouldn't you like to have a call E73M?
Yes.
Hey, that's great. You're missing some data, so I got to do some more data. But I think it's really important that if you build something or have an experiment, publish it and actually publish the data and your conclusions so people can look at it and maybe reproduce it or have some questions or add to it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Dan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll catch you on Slack.
73.
73. Once again, you've been listening to Hamden Thoughts. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again next time.